delighted to be joined by Laurie Boll, Executive Director at SENIA International. It'd be great if we could start off, if you could just tell us a bit about your background and journey through education, Laurie.
Yeah, my own personal journey? Sure, happy to do so. So my husband and I started teaching overseas back in, a long time ago. Let's just say that. And we traveled and worked at multiple international schools throughout the world as I was an elementary school teacher. And then after the birth of our second son or our second child, we realized that he was not developing the same way as his sister. And we realized that he had some special education needs that were not able to, he was not able to be educated in the international school system. So he went back to America. And that is where I got my master's degree in special education, so I could kind of keep up with everything going on when they were telling us all these different acronyms and crazy things. So became a special educator, and since then have taught in several international schools around the world with learning support and also higher support needs programs. So it's been a fast and furious journey over the last 25 years of teaching, and now I am no longer teaching. So
fantastic, brilliant, and obviously, Sen, special educational needs is obviously very personal to you as well through your own child experiencing it too. So yeah, that's yeah,
exactly. So.
Fantastic, and just sort of introducing SENIA International. It'd be great if you could tell us a bit about the mission and values around the organization.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So SENIA, just as a little background, started back in 2002 in Beijing, China, and it was just a group of like 6 or 8 learning support teachers who were at various schools in Beijing, and they felt very alone in their jobs. Historically, inclusivity of any type of special learning need didn't happen in international schools. And so this was a way for them to network. And eventually they came up with a mission statement, value statement, etc. So the mission of SENIA is we're a network of educators, parents, and professionals who advocate for and provide resources for differently abled individuals. Our values are that we want to have an inclusive world where every individual is supported, resources are accessible, potential is maximized, and action is inspired. And so that's their original vision of SENIA. And since then, we have grown into an international organization, and we have chapters in every continent and local and regional chapters. And we have scholarship program. We have 3 pillars basically of SENIA. We offer conferences, virtual and in person. We have local and regional chapters, like I mentioned. And then finally, we have a certification program where individuals can become SENIA certified teachers. And so what that means is that learning support teachers worldwide would have a SENIA kind of stamp of approval, meaning that everyone who's finished that coursework they have the knowledge and background that is approved by SENIA.
Fantastic. And when you say chapters, Laurie, is that like a sort of a regional hub, is it?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, our local chapters really started developing once we were in Beijing, because it was just Beijing, and then they started holding conferences, but people in the Philippines wanted to take part on a more active level. And so they started forming local chapters in cities throughout Asia. And they have their own boards. We help them through the process of starting these boards and running smaller conferences on a smaller scale. And it's just been phenomenal to watch the growth. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. And obviously, many years spent teaching yourself at international schools around the world. And you were key in spearheading intensive needs provisions at the International School of Bangkok until relatively recently. And be great to dive into that a bit and sort of learn a bit more about your experience there. So I think my first question around that would be, firstly, what do we mean specifically by intensive needs? And then sort of looking at, what kind of provisions for intensive needs there were at ISB prior to you joining?
Right. Well, it's a great question. Intensive needs was just kind of the word that was chosen by by groups of people that wanted to serve students who had higher support needs. And so these were typically your students who in the past have never been able to get into an international school. They might have profound autism, be nonverbal, have Down syndrome, any intellectual developmental delay. So that's what we mean. So we're now trying to switch the verbiage from intensive needs to higher support learners.
Okay, fantastic.
Oh, and then your question about ISB. So ISB, they had quite a robust program as it was for learning support at their school. They have support services for English as additional language learners and learning support. So they provided support for mild to moderate special support needs, basically. And then as time went on, the head of school there, Dr. Andy Davies, he really wanted to open up our school for all learners. And he relates that back to when he was a teacher at the school, and he ended up having to exit a student that was a great person. She played on the soccer team. She was really involved with her peers. And academically, she was much lower than her peers. And so he just knew that wasn't right. That wasn't the right thing to do. And so he decided that he wanted to be able to help all learners. And so that was his goal. And luckily it happened.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And sort of putting those provisions in place, so there were already sort of mild to moderate provisions or learning provisions for those students. And then the sort of the higher needs. What kind of provisions did you put in place to sort of help all the learners at the school over that time?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's really important to kind of build up the overall understanding and belief around inclusion. And so before we even started the program, we did a series of workshops and meetings with the community. So others in the community could understand why we were opening this program up. There's a lot of long-held beliefs that individuals who have higher needs take away from the learning of the typical learners, which research has shown that's not true. So we did a lot of work around that. And then we also helped the students in the school understand what the differences were of the individuals coming in and how they could develop friendships with them organically. And it really was pretty powerful. So we did that first. And the actual classroom itself, it is a separate classroom. However, important things to note is that this classroom is center of the school. It's not hidden in a basement somewhere. We're proud of our inclusive practices. And so we want everyone all our students to be visible, right? So did that. And then the classroom itself is a nice space. It has a kitchen for life skills teaching. It has a sensory space, so students can come in and use that to regulate their sensory systems when needed. And then the classroom itself was for us to do their academic and daily life skills goals that are written on their IEP. But what is really important to know is that this was just a classroom. We called it the individualized learning classroom because the goal is inclusion. And so we wanted them to be in this classroom as little as possible. We wanted them to be with their peers and learning alongside their peers, which was very individualized for the students. And if a student could be, they were in the classroom the majority of the day and only pulled into our classroom for some social skills lessons or some life skills. But if a student felt uncomfortable, let's say, in the general education classroom, then they would spend the majority of the day in our classroom. So it's very tailor-made to each and every individual student.
That's really interesting. So getting students together as much as possible through the sensory experiences of the sort of the individualized learning classroom and the general classroom is really important if a school is looking to develop these provisions for all learners.
Yes, exactly. And we opened up our classroom to all learners. So if a class wanted to do a cooking project, we'd invite them into our classroom. And so it normalized the classroom for everyone. Yeah. If some of the students in, let's say, a second grade classroom were having emotional regulation issues or sensory system issues, they could come in and use our sensory room to regulate. So it was good for every student in the entire school.
That's amazing. And the sensory room, it sounds really interesting. What kind of how did it look? Like how was it made sort of extra sensorial for students?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of things that you could focus on in a sensory room, lighting, sound, smells. For ours, it was it had pads everywhere. So kids could run and they could bump into the walls if they wanted to. That meets certain sensory needs for them. Swinging, we had a swing. We had a place for them to climb and different lighting. So we had like lava lamps and things like that if they needed to just turn off the lights and have a quiet, calming space, they could do that. But if you look at sensory rooms around the world, they're all a little bit the same and all a little bit different, right? So you can focus on whatever it is that you need for your students.
Really interesting. And sort of engaging the community you mentioned is really key in sort of making a fully inclusive environment. And what were some of the challenges that were faced around maybe sort of bringing in the community to maybe in that region to making sure that these sort of needs were catered for?
Well, a lot of it was usually people don't want inclusion because they don't understand it or they fear it and they don't really know what their fears are. So we brought the fears to the table and would say, like, your perception might be that your test scores will go down for your typically developing individuals. They will not. Your fear might be, and so we just kind of named the fears and ensured that they understood that their fears, while they had them and are valid, we could make a case that inclusion is is the right thing to do. And so building that belief.
Fantastic, brilliant. And sort of with these different initiatives, with the workshops, with the sort of the community building mindset around the importance of inclusivity for all, and sort of developing these sensorial rooms, what were the sort of what were the key outcomes of this, and what did you learn about when you went through this process?
Yeah, well, it was quite a learning process. It was a learning process for everyone, from the community to administration to other teachers. There were misconceptions that we needed to nip right away. But the key learning was that our students in our program were completely loved by their peers. And I guess a little story is I went in to talk to a classroom about one of the boys that was in our class. And I went into his third grade classroom, I think it was at the time. And I showed a bunch of pictures of him doing things swimming, biking, and I was like, what do you guys like to do any of these things? And so what the end result was is they saw that they had all this in common with him and began to focus on their commonalities rather than their differences. And so one little boy summed it up well. He goes, I liked, let's say his name's George. I liked George because he was different. I wanted to get to know him because he was different. But what I realize now is that we're more the same than we are different. So I like him even more.
Wow.
So
I mean, breaking down those barriers is just so key, isn't it? And yeah, just opening lines of communication to show that they are all essentially the same, and that there's nothing to fear or any of these sort of preconceptions would you say is very important?
Yeah. Yes, very important.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. And I suppose just looking at if a school is looking to sort of develop their intensive needs space or provisions for inclusion, and they're sort of just starting on that journey, I suppose. What kind of tips or sort of practical pieces of advice would you advise that they sort of look at first? Are there sort of particular things that they should look at, in the short term, medium term, maybe long term? Obviously, you mentioned a few things that you did at ISB, and it'd be great to see if there are any sort of general learnings that could be taken from that.
Well, there's a lot, there's that building that capability of the community and the staff and the students surrounding you. There's the actual program and the curriculum and what that looks like. There's so much that what ended up happening is we gathered, sorry, my cat's in here. We gathered a group of individuals who have opened these programs worldwide. And we came up with what we believed was the most important thing of starting a program like this, and created a series of 6 videos of instruction on different areas of focus: finance, curriculum, community building, that inclusion piece. And we've bundled those videos now. And so schools can purchase those from us. And SENIA is a nonprofit organization. The purchase funds go towards scholarships. So it goes right back out into the community. And they can purchase that bundle from us. And then along with that, they can get a mentor from one of us that has started the programs to help them along the process. So. Brilliant.
And this, I suppose that's sort of the whole school approach for SENIA, right? That schools can now join SENIA and get these provisions from you guys, and sort of share ideas through the network as well. And how can that sort of SENIA network help schools as well?
Yeah. Well, we now have just opened up membership for schools, which is really exciting. We've also opened up membership for individuals, just in case schools aren't ready to commit to becoming a SENIA member yet. But it's a pretty impressive platform that we have. We have a platform where individuals can go, they can ask questions from other experts in the field or just their peers worldwide. One such question recently was, I'm getting a new student next year who is on a modified program. I've never created a modified program. Can I get some help? Well, within a day, she's had 10 people offer to help her with this. So it's a great network. Schools can join, and with membership, they can get Q&A session with SENIA board members, or they can get some webinars from us that we've created to help them. So our goal at SENIA is to create more inclusive schools, and we are here to help schools get there. And so we want to help them along the journey any way we can. So a good place to start is by joining SENIA as a SENIA member school, so we can support you along the way.
Fantastic. All right, Laura, thank you so much for that. That was really, really insightful. Sort of introduction to yourself and what SENIA is doing, the great work they're doing around the world. So yeah, thanks so much for your time, and look forward to our next conversation, when maybe we can touch on a couple of the points that we discussed in a bit further depth. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.